Hey folks, thanks for taking the time and going through this video. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is the whole developer experience, right? I truly believe that if we improve the developer experience, we can increase the Kubernetes and microservice adoption in our organization, deliver applications faster, and all the things that you know. But also this can help reduce the load on the DevOps or platform engineering team by enabling that developer self-service model. But a lot of the times that I talk to teams that are trying to enable that developer self-service model, one of the problems or challenges that they face is that developers, because many of them, they lack the underlying experience with Kubernetes, ingress controllers, services, and all of that. They have difficulties implementing or onboarding their own applications and difficulties managing their applications post-deployment, right? And a lot of the times you see the platform team or the DevOps team just having to build a bunch of templates, maintain these templates, and every time there's a change in infrastructure as code, pipeline, cluster version, and so on, you have to keep maintaining that. And they try to create a bunch of these templates so they can help their developers onboard their own apps and that developer self-service. So I wanted to create something that could help with that. And before I talk a little bit about this project, I wanted to show you what I have. I have my Sheepa Cloud account. You can create one as well under apps.sheepa.cloud. Again, apps.sheepa.cloud, it's free and you can have access to everything that I have here. I have a framework called WordPress Dev. If you're not familiar with the concept of frameworks in Sheepa, you can think of them as policies. So I'll call them as a policy framework. This is how Sheepa connects to your underlying cluster. And this is what developers are going to interface with. Now, developers don't have to interface with clusters anymore, but just policies, right? And every time you create a policy, you can create one from the most basic possible to the most detailed one. Every time you create a policy, for example, this WordPress dev, and you connect it to a cluster, that policy will automatically connect to or create a namespace in your cluster. So anything deployed using this policy will be deployed in that created namespace. Great. The second thing is I have that WordPress dev policy connected to a cluster. It's a GCP cluster. Nothing special there. You can create a policy and from here you can connect it to a cluster. Super easy. Great. So the question goes back to how do I help my developers onboard their own applications, right? Using different pipelines, infrastructure as code, and so on. And that's the project I'm putting together. Again, it's a side project. I'm just starting and I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. I just started putting this together. I will probably release a alpha, beta, or whatever version if you folks find it useful, and I'll keep working on it as much as possible. But let's say I'm a developer and I want to onboard a WordPress application, and I have no experience with Kubernetes, and I'm using, for example, Pulumi, right? So I can come in here and I can say add a deployment. In the config, you're going to see it's going to ask me for my application name. If I just go through and I do, let's say, this is going to be my WordPress. And the framework is going to be my WordPress dev. Is that right? WordPress dev. That's right. And my team is going to be my Sheepa team. You can also manage your teams directly from user management, and then you get everything. But here I'm filling up. And later I'm going to add the option for you to log in so you can retrieve these info automatically. You don't need to type them manually. I just wanted to show you the concept and would love to get your thoughts, right? Then I'm going to have my image here. My image for WordPress, I'm just going to copy and paste it from a document I have here. It's going to be this. You can do canary, plan, and so on, but I'll keep it basic, right? So config is done, deployment is done, but for my WordPress to work, I need a few environment variables. So I'll just add them here right now. I need my DB host so it can connect to it. I'm gonna be deploying my SQL as well, and you'll see because WordPress has basically two services. If I come here and add another variable, WordPress DB user, and then I'm just gonna have it WordPress. I'll add more variables. my DB password, WordPress, keeping it as secure as possible. And my DB name is gonna be WordPress. Great. So what I added here, a bunch of environment variables that my WordPress app needs. No Kubernetes or nothing involved here, right? I added my image here, my Docker image, and I have added my application name, which framework or policy framework I should use from Shippa, and then the team, right? But I also need a volume. So I have on Shippa already created a volume plan and created those 2 volumes, for example. So I'm just gonna leverage them. Or those volumes are available, someone in my team created them, right? I'm gonna create a mount path under this location. And the volume name is WordPress data, which is my volume available here, right? That I just created using the UI. You can create that using your infrastructure as code that comes later, right? Great. So this is my WordPress deployment. I can come here and I can add another deployment. I'll just call it MySQL, and I'll call WordPress dev as well, and it's going to be a Shippa team. Same thing. You could deploy this to using a different policy that is connected to a different cluster, or a different policy in the same cluster, so that goes to another namespace, so you can create isolation. The point is, me as a developer, I don't need to know, or I don't need to care about the underlying infrastructure. I'm just building what I need for my app. Here, the second thing is the image. Okay, great. And I'm gonna need some environment variables, same thing. Great, so I entered the environment variables that my MySQL is gonna need, again, keeping it super safe and secure with those special passwords. I'm also gonna need, not an environment variable, I'm gonna need a volume as well. So my MySQL can store information in an external volume when deploying, right? I'm gonna use, again, same way as before, a volume that I created before called MySQL vol. You can find this here. And the mount path is gonna be this. Great. The only thing missing now is a dependency, right? Because my WordPress connects to my MySQL instance, I need to wait for MySQL to come up first. So I can just come in here and say, add a dependency, and I'm gonna add a dependency on MySQL. Oops. Great. I built it. This is my application. This is my MySQL application. And now I can generate the definition that I need, right? Right now I'm building definitions across different providers, and these providers, they connect to Shippa, for example. As an example, I can use Pulumi. So I'll generate, it creates an index.typescript right now, at least. On my right side screen here, I can just do Pulumi. What is the command? New TypeScript. Oh, it's not empty. I'll use force. This is going to be called WordPress Pulumi. Just call it WordPress, so it's easier. Pulumi and Shippa. Stack name dev is just fine. Great, so the project is created. If I just do locally, I can see my index file and my Pulumi package. I have an index here. My index is pretty much blank, there's nothing. So let me remove this index from here, and what I'll do is I'll copy my index file from my downloads folder to here, right? The index file that was generated by the side project that I have, no name yet. So I have it here. If I do vi index, let's see what it created. again, for my developer, it created actually a full Pulumi definition. I can see here my application definition and so on. And because Pulumi is going to be connecting to Shippa to deploy my Shippa API to deploy this application, you can see that my definition is much easier than having Pulumi use Helm or accessing my cluster API directly. It's using Shippa's API, which is an application level API, right? And passing that what I need. So I'm passing here app, image, and so on, and everything that I need to deploy my application. So now let's get it out of this file. And if I do Pulumi up, for example, oh, it cannot find module Shippa core Pulumi. Great. So if I just come to package.json, I can just, let me just delete this and I'll just replace with something else. I have my dependencies here, which is going to download Pulumi package and the Shippa core Pulumi package, right? Now if I do yarn install, now it starts installing. Great. All right, and if I do Pulumi up, for example, I'll say yes. And it is creating. If we go back to our Shippa dashboard, on my applications, I can see my MySQL application is being created. If you have a Shippa CLI, you can probably see the log on MySQL. So you can see your MySQL app is coming up right now. Rollout successful, great. Now MySQL is all coming up. And if we go back to our Pulumi, now we can see that it's deploying WordPress because MySQL worked successfully. Now I can see WordPress. And same thing, if you do Shippa app log, for example, WordPress, you can see it's attaching the volume and your WordPress is going to be coming up in a second. And again, you can see that all of that developers, they can easily template stuff themselves, deploy their apps without having to know anything about Kubernetes. We as ops, we just have to provide them with a framework connected to a cluster. That's it. We can choose the cluster, we can choose ingress, we can choose all the policies. We just give them that. They template it themselves with this project, and they can deploy their own apps. The app is probably running already. If I go into WordPress, I can see all the details of the app as usual. So you get everything that you get from a Shippa perspective. Then from here, you can see information container, everything that you get from a Shippa perspective, right? If I just go back and I do my Pulumi destroy, for example, then it destroys everything. Done. And it would be the same thing if you wanted to use other type of stack, right? Here I just deleted. If I just come in here and I do crossplane, for example, and I do generate, it creates a crossplane YAML file. If I just go into my download folders and I do, I have kubectl with a cluster here, access to a cluster that has crossplane installed, and it has the Shippa provider for crossplane installed. All right, if we just look here, it generated everything much easier, right? Much condensed, and the developer will be looking pretty much at an application-centric definition using crossplane, and it's very close to the one from Pulumi. We can see the one for MySQL and another one for WordPress. Let me just enter this here. I'll make that fix. So this is also generated automatically. If I do kubectl apply crossplane, for example, great. My MySQL is created and my WordPress is also created. If I go back to Shippa, I can start, I'll see the deployment starting. Same thing, right? And pretty soon I'll start getting the same level of information, map, and everything between that you get from a Shippa. But I wanted to show you this project to help your developers template and onboard their own applications and export into the infrastructure as code tool they need or maybe the pipeline they need, such as GitLab or GitHub Actions. Quickly onboard, upload it there. The next thing I'm building on top of this is allowing folks to save and share with other members of the team or publicly. I'd love to get your thoughts. Is this useful to you? Thank you.